Chapter 91, Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint. Feng Lin's body straightened as radiance filled his eyes. A powerful aura seemed to emit from deep within him, possessing the spirit of a dragon and ferociousness of a tiger. Every increase of vitality was the evolution of life from lower to higher grounds. It was only natural for low-grade life forms to feel pressured by high-grade ones. This was the crushing effect between vitality tiers. Just like a mouse to a cat, lower-grade life forms would lose without a fight. Feng Lin's vitality broke through 16, and his body became incredibly huge. He felt like the earth-shattering interior of a volcano, his body hiding an immense amount of power. It was kept calm under his control, but once there was a change, it could explode in an instant. The power was like the boiling lava, gushing down in waves as it destroyed everything in a split second. Thinking back on that intense feeling of hunger, Feng Lin celebrated inwardly. It was fortunate that he didn't strengthen his genes all the way and was patient. Curbing the thirst of his desires, he first compensated for his overdraft vitality and replenished his nourishment. Interstellar cultivators demanded way too much nourishment to sustain themselves. If one had rashly increased their vitality tiers by wide margins, it would have gone against the energy conservation laws and caused their body to go into a state of nutrition deficiency, vitality overdraft, and finally, the breakdown. Through each cultivation, Feng Lin gained a deeper understanding of it. Cultivation was akin to building a house. You couldn't be careless with it. One should lay each brick slowly and steadily, until finally, you built an indomitable skyscraper. It was not as simple as rowing a boat upstream, where you fell back if you stopped moving forward. If this didn't progress, then it'd lead to an instant crumble, falling from the skies and into dust. There's a huge risk that comes with cultivation. Terrifying. The accumulation of these precious experiences became Feng Lin's most treasured fortune on his cultivation journey. Having replenished himself with nutrition, all the energy was being transformed into gene potential. After this, Feng Lin stayed at home, committing wholeheartedly into grinding his body and conquering the tremendous change he had just gone through. Looking at the stirring undercurrent of Mars and the controversy of giant pharmaceutical company, his gut feeling told him that he should strengthen his body with haste, as this was the only way for him to establish himself in an invincible position. Feng Lin quietened down and began researching the martial arts he just got his hands on, Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint. This was a unique martial art that had been dug out from the traces of mythology. It consisted of 12 palm imprints, including swordsmanship and other weapons techniques. The methods were conventional and complicated, such as a mortal-slaying sword imprint, sky-flipping hammer imprint, god-beating whip imprint. Huaxia ancient martial arts derive from the development of close combat fighting on battlegrounds. For example, 8 Extremes Fist was derived from spear techniques, Tai Chi Fist from hammer techniques, and 8 Trigram Palm from dagger techniques. This Kunlun Grand Palm imprint consisted of various weaponry traits. It looked plain and unglamorous, but was filled with essence of martial arts. Every technique was basic and could be combined freely. Having infused the essence of various martial arts into one, the techniques which could be made available was boundless. Feng Lin thought to himself. It was no wonder that the long-robed man could counter all his varying attacks despite not being at his level of might. Who would have expected that the man had grasped such a profound knowledge? It was only a pity that this wasn't a gene martial art, and could not dominate upon genetic power. Yet, perhaps that was precisely why this form of martial arts possessed such variations. Genetic martial arts was strong due to genetic power, but it was also restricted by the uniqueness of it which constrained its flexibility. Take Vajra subduing Devil Fist for example. Using Vajra gene as the basis of its power, it could be as flexible as Tai Chi, using softness to conquer strength and transforming the attacking energy as its own. Ancient martial arts didn't have such restrictions. abiding by the logic of martial arts, it was not restricted by genetics and could change infinitely. The name, Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint, gave Feng Lin room for imagination as well. Immortal slaying sword, yin yang mirror, sky-flipping hammer, god-beating whip, these were considered legendary weapons in Huaxia mythologies and held the power to destroy heaven and earth. These imprints were regarded the same way as their names. With just 1,000th or even 10,000th of the weapon's grace, its power would be something that shouldn't be underestimated. It wasn't genetic martial arts, but it was even more superior than it. Feng Lin's anticipation toward Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint grew, and he began to test it out. Immortal Slaying Sword Imprint. Feng Lin's hands became the tip of a sword, slapping together before stabbing forward like a legendary sword. It seemed like a normal piercing, but it still had tricks up its sleeve. The muscles on his fingers quivered, moving the air around him as it formed an invisible energy, slicing through the air. A high-pitched sound rang out, and the sharp edge penetrated through the air. It exuded an aura that truly seemed like it could slay immortals and destroy deities. However, that was only mildly so. It was the first time Feng Lin was trying to use the technique, and he didn't have a great understanding of it, making it impossible to provoke its full potential. Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint was an ancient martial art which Feng Lin had never encountered before. Its technique was extremely intricate. Each action demanded meticulousness in its execution, style, and energy distribution. With such strict criteria, most people would never be able to master it. Only interstellar cultivators who had complete control over their body would be able to command it with ease. Feng Lin was quick at picking it up. Regarding those actions which would have been difficult for a normal person, to the extent of seemingly going against the logic of a human body, Feng Lin mastered them in an instant. However, he would still need more time in practicing its execution to bring out the full potential. Finishing up with his practice on a mortal slaying sword imprint, Feng Lin began trying out the next technique without pause. Sky-flipping hammer imprint. Feng Lin curled both his hands into fists. Every inch of muscles on his body rose and fell like waves. As his body gathered the energy, he struck forth, packing everything in that single punch. Ha! Feng Lin's strike was like a giant hammer striking down abruptly. It was as though it had flipped the sky and suppressed the human world. The space around him seemed to be smashed as his strength seeped into it. The wind dissipated the clouds from Feng Lin's explosive punch, leaving only the rattling sound of metal from his assault. What an obnoxious technique! Feng Lin was stunned. The sky-flipping hammer imprint packed all his strength into one strike, surpassing Feng Lin's expectations with its ferocity. If Luke were able to use this technique to its full potential earlier, then Feng Lin would have had his hands full trying to counter the two of them. For them to have this skill was a waste. Under Feng Lin's summoning, the Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint's potential was beginning to show, revealing its immense strength and speed. Like a child who had just received his favorite toy, Feng Lin couldn't stop experimenting. God-beating whip imprint. Feng Lin swung his arm without mercy as a resounding smack echoed. Like a whip which had just struck a god, it landed with enough strength to strike that god down to earth. Yin-yang mirror imprint. Yang on one hand and yin on the other, they combined like two sides of a mirror. One was tough while the other gentle, one was life while the other death. There was no way to defend against it. Immortal binding rope imprint. Keeping the movement of the arms smooth as the fingers orchestrated the technique, it worked like an immortal's vine. It was capable of capturing a dragon with its grasp as it coiled around its opponent, snatching them by force. Feng Lin practiced every technique in Kunlun Grand Palm Imprint. Each had their own unique traits. There were fist techniques, hammer techniques, and seizing techniques. Some were tough while the others gentle, allowing it to have a multitude of variations. Through ceaseless experimenting, Feng Lin's knowledge deepened. He understood the theory behind each martial techniques, the different schools or martial arts as well as the techniques to exerting his power. These were all basic techniques which would allow him to apply it to martial skills with similar traits. This Kunlun Grand Palm imprint was like a stove which welcomed anything and everything, mixing them perfectly in it. Feng Lin was overjoyed. If he was able to apply these ancient martial arts technique, then his skills in combat would definitely strengthen by leaps and bounds. In actuality, regardless of ancient or genetic martial arts, the difference in its essence was the applicable of genetic power. However, the most basic technique in exerting power was similar. Feng Lin reached an epiphany. Perhaps this Kunlun Grand Palm imprint could be combined with genetic martial arts, driving various genetic powers? That's very possible. The thought came to him without warning. Luke's imprints were ever-changing before, driving that technique of windfire power. Every style within the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint was vastly different, yet, maybe it could be combined with genetic martial arts which held similarities to it and steering it into genetic powers and martial arts. The thought of him being able to use different types of genetic martial arts freely caused Feng Lin to be inspired. Would this count as countless transformations? Chapter 92, 1,000 Changes, 10,000 Transformations. In the legends, Sun Wukong had the ability to transform. He could easily take the form of any living creatures and could even imitate their abilities. Given Feng Lin's understanding and knowledge toward genetic theories, he could be sure that once he awakened the Sun Wukong gene, he would surely obtain the ability of the countless transformations. This wasn't just a fantasy, but he didn't know anything definite about it. If he could really transform into anything he wanted to and use all kinds of abilities, wouldn't that simply be too domineering? Every type of mythological ability was different. The ways to use them were different as well. If the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint could be incorporated with the various abilities of genetic martial arts or be used in sync with the ability of countless transformations, that would simply be a perfect match and he would be successful in every endeavor. Although Feng Lin was walking on the mythological path of Sun Wukong, he wouldn't be limited to only this path. No matter how great a mythological path was, it still belonged to another existence's path, not your own. The earlier phases of cultivation in awakening mythological genes were considered just a learning process, just for them to gain extraordinary abilities. But if they wished to step onto a higher stage, they had to find their own path to reach the pinnacle. Maybe, this Kunlun Grand Palm imprint might be a bout of good fortune that would allow him to surpass Sun Wukong's path. When he thought about this, Feng Lin was stirred with excitement. However, incorporating his genetic martial arts weren't something that could be done in a single step. For first, Feng Lin decided to start with ancient martial arts. And what was better than to start it with the first art he had learned, the Hong Fist. The Hong Fist was an extremely tough and fierce fist art. His punches would be in straight lines and were incomparably ferocious. Every attack was akin to flowing mercury, giving his opponent no chance to counterattack. In the ancient battlefields, this martial art was incredibly valiant. Its moves resembled waving huge hammers around with incomparable momentum. Feng Lin slowly displayed his moves. He took all the movements of the Hong Fist, which he had comprehended, and slowly dissected them, trying his best to think of ways to incorporate the first move of the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint, the sky-flipping hammer imprint, into it as he sought to find common points between the two arts. The sky-flipping hammer imprint had a total of 3 variations. But as Feng Lin gradually incorporated the essence of Hong Fist into it, another variation was born. Next, the 8 Extremes Fist. The 8 Extremes Fist, by itself, was created in the cold weapon era of ancient Earth, from spear arts. It had large sweeping movements and ruthless killing techniques. There was a saying that if one practiced the 8 Extremes Fist for a year, he could kill a human. For the new practitioners of the 8 Extremes Fist, they would already have fearsome combat prowess after a year. Their punch force would be overly heavy, and stories of its martial practitioners killing others in a fight were pretty frequent. Feng Lin took on the 8 Extremes stance and continued to unleash punches, shoulders ram, elbow strikes. He tried to fathom the energy flow and transmission in his body. The attacks he unleashed felt like a giant spear piercing out, violent and tyrannical. The spear had some common points with the whip. Although there were also many unharmonious parts, Feng Lin only focused on the common points and tried to integrate it with the God-beating whip imprint, increasing the number of variations of the God-beating whip imprint to 3. After fusing these tough and fierce martial arts, Feng Lin started to attempt to fuse martial arts of a softer nature. Right at the start, the martial art he wanted to fuse was the Tai Chi Fist. Tai Chi Fist was one of the 3 strongest internal strength practices of ancient Wuxia. The depth of knowledge in this martial art was extremely deep. It combined both the tough and soft aspect of martial arts, allowing one to control external forces to amplify their inner force. Tai Chi could be divided into yin and yang, life and death, tough and soft. It had the unique characteristic of duality. Both yin and yang actually had common points and could be fused as one. Seizing the sparrow's tail. Explosive Fist. Turning Block. Feng Lin displayed the moves of Tai Chi and experienced both the fusion of the soft and tough aspect, fusing it together with the yin-yang mirror imprint and increasing its number of variations by 1. He fused his 8 trigram palms with the primordial flag imprint, the Xingyi Fist into the Dragon Evasion pillar imprint, and the Dragon Claw art into the Binding Immortals rope imprint. There were multitudes of martial arts in the world, but the martial logic behind all of them was similar. An ocean is made up of hundreds of rivers and streams, containing vast quantities of water. The Kunlun Grand Palm imprint was, as expected, a supreme ancient martial art from the mythological era. It contained the essence of all martial arts. One could fuse all of them into it. If Feng Lin could complete all the fusions, even he couldn't gauge the upper strength limit of Kunlun Grand Palm imprint. Thus, he was filled with anticipation. And through these repeated attempts, Feng Lin gradually gained deeper knowledge with regards to the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint. This Kunlun Grand Palm imprint was equivalent to a basic mathematical formula, and other martial arts were equivalent to a variety of data parameters that could be included inside for calculation. The end result would produce new martial art techniques and moves. Genetic martial arts were naturally the same as well, but their data was much more complex and more difficult to integrate. Earlier, that captain of the Mars Revolutionary Army could control the power of wind and fire. Clearly, he had successfully integrated some kinds of genetic martial arts with the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint, which resulted in the powers of his wind and fire to be so close to perfection. If it wasn't because of his stone monkey gene's ability to be impervious to water and fire and he could negate the energy effects, Feng Lin would definitely need to expend huge amounts of effort to deal with Luke. However, what made Feng Lin slightly depressed was that despite how careful he was, he still didn't realize that Luke had held something back. He only gave him the most basic model of the techniques in the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint and not the variations he had deduced and created. If he wanted to increase the might of the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint, he could only do his own deductions and continue trying to integrate other martial arts into it. But this was already enough. As long as he knew the logic of an ocean is made up of hundreds of rivers and streams, Feng Lin could create his own new techniques. He didn't need to depend on others. Feng Lin immersed himself in his training, seemingly enjoying it, and would be never tired of it as he started to practice again. However, it was extremely tough to execute any of the steps to perfection. Right now, he could only fuse a small part of these various ancient martial arts into the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint, or else, it wouldn't make sense that there was only one additional variation to each of the imprints. These ancient martial arts were passed down from the ancient Earth era and naturally had extraordinary knowledge within, as well as practicability, or it wouldn't have been passed down through the generations up until now. And myths and legends were just exactly the opposite. During the ancient Earth era, nobody thought that knowing myths and legends would be of any use, and they completely disregarded it. After 3 series of world wars, 2 planetary wars, and 5 interstellar wars, the majority of the ancient civilizations had been destroyed. And as a result, the stories about myths and legends slowly started to disappear, leaving behind only a word or two in reference for some isolated phrases. Pointless war engulfed the whole galaxy until the interstellar era arrived. It was only then did they realize and rediscover the existences of myths and legends. But sadly, everything was too late, and they were filled with endless regret. The profound essence of ancient martial arts was the crystallization of the wisdom of countless ancients. Feng Lin didn't believe that his talent in martial arts would surpass so many ancient geniuses, allowing him to instantly grasp the essence of these ancient martial arts and integrate them into the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint. Cultivation valued persistence. Each and every step required a huge amount of energy and effort. Feng Lin wasn't in a hurry, and he slowly started the fusion process. He continued to experiment with different moves, and this, by itself, was also a type of cultivation process that would drive his body closer to perfection, allowing him to control his force perfectly. Genetic potential plus 5%, plus 5%, plus 5%. Feng Lin's genetic potential kept soaring. Although the speed of it increasing wasn't too fast, it also couldn't be considered slow. After some time, his genetic potential reached 588%. If it were to increase by a little more, he would have been able to gain a free primeval genetic point and could have added the strengthening tally of the stone monkey gene by 1. After becoming an interstellar cultivator, although his cultivation speed had increased, the amount of genetic potential he required was much larger than before. Feng Lin put in even more effort in his cultivation. It was like he didn't know what was fatigue. His powerful body was able to persist, allowing him to continue training until the end. In the blink of an eye, 10 hours had already passed. Feng Lin moved and leaped about in his training room. His palm imprint continuously changed and was like a butterfly flying through the flowers, unleashing different moves, using his hands as hammers, claws, or palms. His palms flew around wildly, and his moves seemed to contain countless numbers of variations. Feng Lin finally created a new move for every technique in the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint. When he displayed them, he truly felt that they were capable of 1,000 changes. Undoubtedly, he was on the right path. From the first technique, the sky-flipping hammer imprint, to the last technique, primordial flag imprint, Feng Lin displayed them all and finally ceased his movements, no longer continuing to practice. Based on the original techniques in the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint, Feng Lin made some deductions and created new moves, starting the initial fusion between that and the various ancient martial arts. This caused the power of the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint to increase greatly, far stronger than before. He decided to name this new version of the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint as Kunlun Grand Palm imprint version 1.0. In the future, as he comprehended the essence of more ancient martial arts, he would slowly fuse them inside and create version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. If he could reach the level where he could fuse genetic martial arts into it, at that time, he would rename this martial art as Kunlun Grand Palm imprint version 2.0. After his initial success, Feng Lin knew that his own self-knowledge had already reached his current limits. If he wished to improve further, he had to use more time to practice and increase his level of attainment in martial arts. Although he thirsted for strength, he also had to respect reality. And now, his comprehension of martial arts was still insufficient. he also didn't have enough time. He temporarily gave up on strengthening the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint and started to continue researching his genetic abilities. After fighting with a true interstellar cultivator, he had already verified some of the stone monkey gene's abilities. As a variation primeval gene, the 4 abilities of the stone monkey gene were stone body, steel bones, boundless strength, impenetrable by sword and spear, and impervious to fire and water. Among interstellar cultivators of the same rank, he was simply a bug-like existence. Next, Fenglin started to test the abilities of his mental gene. This was a high-grade basic gene. Fenglin didn't believe that it merely had the ability of mental perception. Mental energy was formless and its might unpredictable. If he developed a corresponding long-range attack, that would drastically mitigate the fact that he was only proficient in close-range combat. With more methods of attacking, he would have the ability to adapt to changes better, and his combat prowess would also increase. This would be much more effective to him compared to continuing to awaken his other genes. The important thing about genetic abilities was quality and not quantity. Fenglin meticulously researched. His mental energy originated from the center of his brows. It was like a formless giant web that covered his surroundings. Everywhere his mental energy swept by, he would be able to perceive all things in that area. But this effect was merely an auxiliary one. How to allow his mental energy to truly have killing power? Fenglin tried for a long time, but he still couldn't find a way to do so. He could only give up temporarily for now. If there was a question, just ask the Star Network. He tapped on his ID microchip and connected to the Star Internet Network. He then typed the words mental gene, mental energy, combat prowess, occupation, and other key terms in the search bar. Hundreds of search results instantly appeared. Fenglin directly locked his gaze on the name of an occupation that appeared on the top of the list. Genetic hypnotist. Chapter 93, Genetic hypnotist. Mental energy was a kind of energy that had no form or substance to it. Once it was sent out, it was hard for others to detect or defend against it. Scientists discovered, after multiple investigations, that mental energy was a strange kind of brainwaves. Once someone awakened the mental gene, they would be able to send out these brainwaves just like sound waves. There would even be a return echo once the brainwaves hit any objects, and the pituitary gland would be able to sense the rebounded brainwaves and perceive the surroundings from there. This was extremely similar to the echolocation ability of dolphins. In addition, when this kind of brainwaves was strengthened to a certain extent, it would manifest and could interfere with the thoughts of others, hypnotizing them or even causing them to be trapped inside an illusion. This was the theory of genetic hypnotists. Genetic hypnotists, through awakening mythological genes, could use mental energy to hypnotize people. They could cure psychological problems of patients, causing their targets to sink into a deep sleep and even nourishing their targets' hearts and minds. But similarly, there were some genetic hypnotists who would make use of these methods to control the human heart, all to satisfy the greed in their hearts. In any case, genetic hypnotists were an extremely rarely seen type of geneticists. Their abilities couldn't be considered extremely powerful or well-rounded, but they were strange and crafty. However, Fenglin felt his heart stir. The human heart was always the hardest to fathom. If he could control the ability of mental hypnosis, he could effortlessly pry into people's heart. Wouldn't that be extremely useful? He would be able to know what others were thinking about in advance. This would undoubtedly prove to be extremely advantageous when one was fighting in psychological warfare. The inner situation of the giant pharmaceutical company was extremely strange. There were all sorts of rumors and several people with ill intents. Maybe he could depend on this kind of mental hypnotic abilities to find out some secrets and learn the truth so he could take preventative measures, allowing himself to be set up in a position of invincibility. When he thought of this, Feng Lin started to search for more information regarding genetic hypnotists. Although the giant pharmaceutical company was just a genetic potion manufacturer, the educational training modules offered about geneticists were extremely detailed. Hence, there was also information about genetic hypnotists. Hypnotism is a kind of mental control. The users first have to have strong mental strength. After that, through language, actions, and body movements, they are capable of releasing their own charisma to build up affinity and creating a strong suggestion, trying to influence the target's mind. Ultimately, they could even control their target's consciousness. The genetic hypnotist qualifications can be classified as hypnotist apprentice, initial grade hypnotist, mid-grade hypnotist, high-grade hypnotist, and grandmaster hypnotist. The salary for hypnotist apprentice wasn't high. As long as one awakens the mental gene, one can learn some of the more elementary hypnotism techniques. It is different for the official hypnotists. They have to undergo many difficult exams before they can reach the stage where they can control the hearts of people through hypnotism. Only then can they be called an official hypnotist. Initial grade hypnotists can cause their targets to enter deep sleep and heal the injuries of their psyche. Initial grade hypnotists have a salary ranging from 100,000 star coins to 1,000,000 star coins usually. The information in the educational module about genetic hypnotists was extremely detailed. Feng Lin skimmed over the info and was startled. What? An initial grade hypnotist can have such a high salary? His heart stirred with excitement. If he could become a genetic hypnotist, his mental energy would have killing power. Not only did this mean that he would have one more method to protect himself, but he could even depend on his mental energy to earn large amounts of star coins. This could also be considered a skill in a specialized area. Once he made a decision, Feng Lin would stick to it. Although the educational module by the giant pharmaceutical company only had common knowledge about genetic hypnotists, it was already sufficient to the current Feng Lin. Feng Lin tapped on the module. A projection of a bearded middle-aged man clad in long robes appeared. He sat down cross-legged, and his expression was like an ancient well with no waves in it, tranquil and peaceful as he slowly began the introduction to the module. If you want to learn how to become a hypnotist, you first have to understand biomagnetic fields. Biomagnetic fields? Feng Lin pondered, feeling that this term was extremely profound. At this point, the middle-aged man from the projection started to explain. Biomagnetic fields are a mystery within a mystery. It's very tough to gauge it using machinery, and one can only sense it through the usage of sensitive mental energy. Biomagnetic fields are a kind of special magnetic field that is made up of a combination of breathing, heartbeat, pulse, and even brainwaves of a living creature and would have a unique wave frequency to it. The biomagnetic field of every human is unique, just like one's fingerprints. If there are 1,000 humans, there would be 1,000 different biomagnetic fields. Despite how boundlessly vast the galaxy is, there wouldn't be a situation where there are two people with the same biomagnetic field. Even for twins, there would still be a difference in their biomagnetic fields. Hence, what genetic hypnotists need to do is to use their sensitive mental energy to grasp the biomagnetic fields of humans or other living creatures. After that, through the usage of language, actions, and body language, they could form a mental resonance with the target before finally causing their target's minds to grow numb. In the end, it would allow them to be controlled. Although this sounds extremely unreliable when speaking of it, the rationale behind it is very simple. For example, the soldier before the war, the admonishment of an army officer, the singing of military songs, all these hot-blooded incidents can stimulate soldiers to enter a feverish and heated-up state where they will fight in combat bravely, with no thought of their personal safety. This was also a kind of hypnotism. Feng Lin's eyes shone brightly, storing this valuable knowledge deep in his mind. Hypnotism emphasizes on not leaving any traces. It's a superior technique. If one intentionally wanted to hypnotize others, it would only cause their target's heart to be filled with wariness. Hence, there are 3 common techniques that are used often by hypnotists. They are hand imprints, speech, and tools. Hand imprints are a kind of unique martial art that can stimulate one's mental energy and use it to cause the consciousness of others to be blurred as one carries out the hypnotism. Speech is a kind of method where one depends on the special pronunciation of words or rhythm to shake the consciousness of others. For example, some of the Buddhist chants from the ancient earth era are famous for being used for hypnotism, granting the effect of enlightenment. As for tools, it means that the hypnotists would use a variety of special tools such as pocket watches, coins, cards, to distract the target's attention before achieving a silent hypnotism effect. Although the techniques are different, the logic behind them is the same. With regards to the innate nature of hypnotism simply means using one's mind to smash the mind of others. There are 3 essential points. Firstly, the hypnotist has to grasp the biomagnetic field of the target. The first point depends on the sharpness of one's spiritual sense. Secondly, one has to unleash their mental energy and focus it on their target through body movements and their voices to create a strong influence. Thirdly, the timing is crucial. One has to find the best timing to smash the defense of the target's mind. All 3 essential points have to be mastered before one could become a qualified hypnotist. When he heard this, Feng Lin temporarily paused the lesson and started to contemplate. The 3 essential points of hypnotism sounded easy, but it was anything but easy to achieve them. No matter how great a person's strength was, they had to learn combat techniques before they could unleash their strength. If not, they were just like a stupid ox. Similarly, no matter how strong the mental energy of someone, they had to learn the appropriate techniques before they could unleash it. It was easy to unleash energy, but it was 100 times more difficult to liberate one's mind. How should he do it exactly? Filled with puzzlement, Feng Lin continued to listen to the module. There are all kinds of methods and techniques to liberate one's mind. Here, we will introduce one of the most simple tricks, a smile. A smile that comes from one's innermost heart that's displayed on one's face would have a powerful formless influence, causing others to be happy. Smiling can gain you the trust of others. If your expression is cold and you have a poker face, other people would instantly be wary towards you the moment they glanced at you. If that's the case, the probability of you successfully hypnotizing the target would be greatly diminished. Smiling and physical contact are the shortest bridges to link strangers. By doing so, it would make things easier for you to enter the minds of your target. The education module came to an end at this point. To liberate the power of the mind, it has to start from a smile. When he heard of this, Feng Lin suddenly saw the light. He finally understood what was called body language and how to unleash the power of his mind. This was the easiest logic to understand. He already understood the general truth. Next, what he needed to learn was how exactly could he become a genetic hypnotist. Chapter 94, Yin-Yang Illusory Realm. Boom! Feng Lin's palm imprint became a whip as he lashed out ruthlessly. It was like he was the controller of this universe, sitting atop his lofty throne in the air as he wielded a divine whip, smacking those deities in heaven down to earth. Tai. After one move, Feng Lin's gesture changed. Both his palms executed the sky-flipping imprint and smashed down ruthlessly. It was akin to the Busho heavenly pillar in the legends crumbling with a loud rumble, destroying the human world. Bzz. His palm imprint changed again as his fingers extended outward. One of his hands was Yang, the other was Yin, one was the sun, the other the moon. His hands switched over, giving rise to a myriad of transformations. His hands were like mountains. he lifted them high as his moves changed again. He was akin to a lofty and majestic mountain, immovable. They were the many variations of the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint. The aura of his moves was extremely imposing, shocking the hearts of people. However, Feng Lin wasn't practicing his martial arts now. He was trying to sense the might of his palm imprints. After looking at the basic educational module for genetic hypnotists, Feng Lin learned some of the basic hypnotism theory and techniques as he contemplated about them over and over again. One of the techniques was to use hand gestures to induce hypnotism, using his formless aura to shake up his target's heart, forcibly breaking through the psychological defensive line of his target. And just so nicely, speaking of hand imprints, he coincidentally was also skilled in the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint. Why didn't he make use of it? He couldn't help but say the effect was truly not bad. Once he used these palm imprints, their aura was clearly extraordinary and had the power to influence the heart of others. Even before the might from the palm imprints were unleashed, the imposing manner of it would already have shaken the heart of others, allowing him to gain victory without a fight. There was a hope for it to be refined into a method of hypnotism that he could use. But this was merely just an ancient martial art after all. He had no problems shaking the hearts of his target, but if he really wanted to achieve a hypnotism effect, he still needed to combine the usage of his mental energy techniques and some other means. Feng Lin went online again to research more about the specific methods of using hand imprints for hypnotism. The devil subduing imprint from Buddhism, the lion imprint, the heaven heart 5 thunder imprint from Taoism, the rain requesting imprint, and even the praying gesture from Christianity, he wanted to attempt to merge the ceremonies of the various religions into it. Although by implementing all of them was very tiring, he wouldn't suffer a loss as long as he could find a way to master the hypnotism method. The more Feng Lin understood about the Kunlun Grand Palm imprint, the more profound and mysterious he found it to be. It was difficult to figure it out clearly within a short period of time. The ability of it to include the essence of all martial arts was simply too strong. This was a martial art that would improve as the cultivator strengthened. Currently, the might he could unleash from using it might not be considered very powerful, but it possessed endless potential. Feng Lin silently felt glad that he was fortunate enough to obtain this martial art, enabling him to enrich his techniques greatly. He treated the palm imprints as his body language, the gesture to induce hypnotism, as he experimented over and over again. It was a pity that Feng Lin didn't have a partner he could experiment on. He could only stand in front of a mirror and attempt to hypnotize himself. However, it was very difficult to hypnotize oneself because the hypnotist himself already knew that he was trying to hypnotize himself. There would be a natural wariness in his heart, and he unconsciously would guard against the hypnotism. Hence, it was very tough for the hypnotism to succeed. It was like using his hand to lift himself up into the air. It went against logic and was extremely difficult to achieve. Only high-grade hypnotists would barely manage to succeed in doing it. Feng Lin didn't delude himself that he would succeed in a single try. It was just that since he didn't have a target to practice on, he could only practice it on himself. If this hypnotism technique would achieve a little effect when he used it against himself, there was no need to doubt that the effect would be much stronger when used against others. Facing the mirror, Feng Lin drew in a deep breath and discarded all distracting thoughts. All sounds in the area faded away, leaving only silence. Feng Lin focused his mental energy and sensed the transformation to the rhythm of his life force, breathing, heartbeat, pulse, as well as the fluctuations of his thoughts and emotions. Suddenly, he moved. It was as though he had gained a trace of the underlying structure of hypnotism. His hand trembled from the rhythm of his life force as the rhythm grew faster and faster. His hands were both yin and yang, and the palm imprint he formed was akin to Tai Chi. Tao begets one, one begets two, two begets three, three begets all things. His palm imprints were symmetrical to each other, just like the reflection from a mirror, isolating the two realms of yin and yang. Yin-yang mirror imprint. Feng Lin tested for a long time, and he discovered that this particular palm imprint contained the most variations in gestures. If he sped up his movements, others would be dazzled, growing dizzy and lightheaded. It should be of use to hypnotism. As expected, when he executed the hand gestures, Feng Lin unconsciously fixed his eyes on the palm imprints. He felt a blur in his eyes as his consciousness dimmed, unconsciously being dragged into the rhythm of the palm imprint. He felt the time in his surroundings slowed. It felt as though the sky was raining flour and his vision was in disorder. His entire body swayed from side to side, as though he was drunk. But because of this, the hand gestures in the palm imprint slowed down. Only then did Feng Lin feel a thrill in his heart as he abruptly woke up. He wasn't startled but felt happy instead. He succeeded in a single try, and it was so effective even when he used it against himself. There was naturally no need to mention how effective it would be if he used this against others. I actually succeeded. The Kunlun Grand Palm imprint is truly extremely profound. He felt extremely excited at having succeeded during the first attempt. However, the effect was still too weak, and he had to continue to practice. Feng Lin recalled the earlier strange feeling. It felt like he was being isolated from time and space. From the myths and legends of Huaxia, the yin-yang mirror was the unique treasure of Scarlet Essence, child of the 12 golden immortals of Kunlun. It was said that it could connect the two realms of yin and yang, and had the ability to tell if someone was about to die if that person looked at his reflection from it. This yin-yang palm imprint might have a trace of divinity from the divine treasures in the legends, allowing people to have the illusion that the yin-yang had reversed. Feng Lin pondered over it, and after he gained some understanding, he tried it out again. Facing the mirror, one of his hands was yin, the other was yang. The style of his hands was completely different, yet they were mutually symmetrical of each other, just like two halves in the mirror. One was the corporeal body, the other was a reflection. After that, the gestures changed repeatedly, mixing in truth and false, reality and illusion. No one was able to tell it apart. In an instant, Feng Lin felt his vision becoming disordered as he entered a strange space. Yin and yang were reversed here, with the time and space also in chaos. But as his consciousness fell into the illusion, his hand gestures slowed once again. The two experiments both succeeded? Feng Lin stared at his hands dumbfoundedly. He finally could be sure of one fact. I actually have already become an initial grade hypnotist. The monthly salary of 100,000 to 1,000,000 coins is waving its hand at me. When he thought back to the bizarre changes that had occurred when he fell into the illusion, he was even more convinced that self-hypnotism was much harder compared to hypnotizing others. Since the effect was so good on himself, if he used it on others, they would definitely not be able to shake the illusion off. The hypnotism method earlier is so effective, let's name it yin-yang fantasy. Feng Lin silently mused, his heart was filled with anticipation. Right now, the yin-yang fantasy was nothing more than a quasi-illusion. But as he grew stronger, could this quasi-illusion become an illusion so true that there were no differences from reality? But if he wished to reach this step, the road ahead was still long. It was better to stand on solid ground and do things step by step. After looking through the basic educational modules provided by the giant pharmaceutical company, Feng Lin took the initiative to search online for information about the various hypnotism methods. Hypnosis psychology, multi-structure of the human consciousness, detailed analysis of mental energy. Given how developed this interstellar era was, the understanding of one's body and psychology far surpassed the ancient era. There was almost a countless number of books about it. Now that Feng Lin's vitality was so strong, his thinking was as quick as lightning as his memory capacities far surpassed the past. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had a photographic memory. He read 10 paragraphs with a single glance and instantly memorized the content, able to succinctly summarize the important points and learn the essential knowledge. His reading speed was so fast that it was unimaginable. Without realizing it, a day passed just like that. He had completely digested the knowledge of all the psychology books he had read and stored them as his foundation, transforming them into something he could use. But given the huge population of humanity and the vastness of the galaxy, he understood that knowledge was boundless. It was impossible for him to learn them all even if he used his entire lifetime. All the knowledge he had accumulated up until now was merely the tip of the iceberg. Very swiftly, during his off day every week, he would spend all his time in cultivation and accumulating knowledge. Finally, dawn approached. It was time for him to head to work once again. After his morning ablutions, Feng Lin headed toward the R&D department of the giant pharmaceutical company. Chapter 95, Formless Influence. It was a day at work again. There were many people bustling about inside the giant pharmaceutical department, all extremely busy. As Feng Lin walked into the R&D department, he discovered that many of his colleagues had already arrived. Their faces were filled with a fanatical look as they did human experimentations. Their hairs were clearly disheveled, and they had a putrid smell. It was unknown how long had it been since they had last bathed. However, nobody cared about this. All of them had the appearance of a mad researcher. These people treated the R&D department like their homes and would labor here through day and night. Other than sleeping and eating, the rest of their time was spent on doing research. They were so passionate that it was almost crazy. The door opened silently and Feng Lin walked in, instantly attracting the attention of many people. After all, they had very deep impressions about Feng Lin. Earlier, this newbie only spent less than a day worth of time before he successfully modified the formula for the adrenaline potion and created a huge commotion. Even the team leader Yak, who always liked to nitpick, had to endure in silence. All of them had different looks in their eyes as they stared: coldness, loathing, trepidation. "Good morning, everyone." Feng Lin smiled and nodded at his colleagues, appearing extremely harmless. The warm rays of the sun lit up his smile, influencing the hearts of others. One doesn't hit a smiling man. The sense of enmity toward this new colleague of theirs, Feng Lin, also gradually lessened. Nobody noticed that Feng Lin's finger was moving about like performing a dance, shifting into marvelous postures. A bizarre fluctuation formlessly extended outward, like a warm and gentle wind, brushing the face of others. Everyone felt slightly absent-minded. They only sensed that the smile of the young man before them was extremely warm and gentle, causing others to involuntarily want to get close to him. "What am I doing?" they mumbled silently to themselves, shaking their heads. But even after a long time, they didn't discover any clues. For some reason, they all felt that Feng Lin was extremely pleasing to the eye. When looking at him, no ill will would appear in their hearts. They couldn't help but think back to their attitudes earlier when they were filled with enmity and hostility toward Feng Lin. What's going on with me? Why would I feel jealous of a young man? He is only just a newbie that has just arrived. It's impossible for him to threaten our positions. Not only that, but his capabilities in the domain of genetic potions far surpass others. He just came here for a day and already modified the adrenaline potions formula to such great effects. His arrival would only greatly speed up the research topics we have at the task force. As his seniors, shouldn't they be filled with a welcoming attitude and take good care of this newbie instead? Such thoughts silently appeared in the minds of these people in the R&D department. All of them then started looking at Feng Lin with a friendly smile on their faces. They felt an indescribable feeling in their hearts, and they didn't know how to articulate what they were feeling. If one wanted to describe this simply, that would be Fenglin's charm plus 10.jpg. It's really effective. Fenglin didn't really feel too surprised at this scene. That's right, he was already stealthily using his hypnotism technique. But naturally, when there were so many people, it was impossible for him to grasp the biomagnetic fields of all of them and lure them into a deep sleep. He wasn't able to do that, but then again, he didn't really need to do that. If he used too much mental energy, the entire group here in the R&D department might be completely hypnotized, and that would create endless troubles for him. Anyone would have been able to tell that there had been a problem then. Hence, Fenglin merely changed his own biomagnetic field slightly and radiated a formless influence that would reduce the amount of hostility the others were feeling toward him and cause them to involuntarily want to get close to him. The effect of doing so was easy to see. Originally, he was a newbie who cut the line, being transferred to the R&D department the moment he joined. Because of the competition for benefits, it was hard to avoid drawing the hostilities of others. But now, the feeling of enmity in the air was greatly reduced, and there would frequently be people around him smiling at him. It was truly the right decision to learn hypnotism techniques. He silently removed the feeling of rejection his colleagues had toward him, allowing him to more easily assimilate into the R&D department to obtain the core secrets. This was like allowing him to obtain the weapons of others by not fighting. The hostility he suffered had already been greatly reduced, and in the future, his situation in the R&D department would also be more comfortable. Fenglin didn't immediately return to his seat. He started to observe the human test subjects that were inside the glass cabins. The faces of his fellow researchers were filled with a fanatical look as they inserted the contents of a genetic potion through a tube that was inserted into the body of a human test subject. They then paid close attention to the reaction of the body and was panting excitedly with a feverish expression on their faces. The instruments above the glass cabin constantly monitored the reactions of the test subject and recorded all the data. Under the impact from the energies contained inside the genetic potion, there would occasionally be test subjects imploding from within, becoming a mess of flesh and blood. After the glass cabin was cleaned up swiftly, another new test subject was forced into it as the experiments continued. Fenglin stood at the side. He didn't disturb these researchers and was silently contemplating about these human test subjects. Upon a closer look, he did indeed discover some of the points he missed before. From what the manager had told him, these human test subjects were all death convicts. This point might be real, but it was worthy to think about the origins of these death convicts. Although these death convicts had all lost their awareness due to the effects of being drugged, their bodies were still extremely strong and fit. They didn't seem to be dragged here from prisons. Given how chaotic the Solar System Coalition government was, the environment in prison was akin to that of hell. It wasn't a place that was suitable for humans to stay in. Once a convict was sent into the prison, it was already very good if he managed to survive. How could he still consume food until he was full? Those who entered prison would at least lose a layer of their skin. The vast majority of death convicts should be emaciated, as thin as a match. Yet, these human test subjects before his eyes were all extremely fit with developed muscles while radiating a fierce and tough aura. They seemed to resemble experienced soldiers that had gone through 100 battles or more. Upon seeing this scene, Fenglin's trust in the Mars Revolutionary Army's words increased by a little. But it was just by a little. Without seeing the true irrefutable proof, Fenglin wouldn't compel himself to do anything. He would only bury his speculations deep in his heart. He still felt vigilant in his heart, but it was only because he wanted to be prepared just in case. After that, Fenglin didn't do anything or ask any questions. He pretended that it was only because he was curious that he walked so near to observe. After that, he returned to his seat and stayed there. As a member of the research task force, Feng Lin used his ID microchip to connect to the network inside the department. He then downloaded some information and understood the contents of the research topic. He discovered that it was truly researching on how to allow ordinary humans to consume genetic potions, and this project had been ongoing for almost 2 years. Their thoughts were to improve on the weakest of all low-grade genetic potions in order to allow ordinary humans to consume them, gradually strengthening their constitution. For example, potions like the adrenaline potions would gradually allow their bodies to adapt to the medicinal effect of genetic potions. They would then slowly increase the grade of genetic potions step by step, gradually making the bodies of ordinary humans adapt to it. In conclusion, an overall plan of consuming low-grade genetic potions to high-grade was formed, and the plan was separated into many minor steps. Each procedure was highly targeted in their objective, allowing the mythological genes of ordinary humans to be stimulated, passively awakening them before slowly upgrading and strengthening the genes, allowing the genes to develop into primeval genes. And from there on, artificially created interstellar cultivators would exist. But because this was a method that excessively destroyed the normal manner of cultivation, these artificial cultivators would find that their potential was greatly reduced and their life force would even be overdraft, leading to a great reduction in their lifespan. It would be tough for them to continue evolving ever again. But this was already enough. Interstellar cultivators were lofty existences, just like Superman on Earth. To many people, this was something that couldn't be actively sought after even if they really wanted it. So, even if there was a reduction in their lifespans, there would undoubtedly be countless people who no longer had hope in cultivation willing to gamble on this. But the reality was always like this: the more beautiful you imagine something was, the more different it would be when you actually did it. The research topic's path of thinking seemed to be pretty good. There were no flaws in the theory, but in reality, the actual progress was slowed to a crawl. Even using genetic potions to allow ordinary humans to awaken the lowest grade basic genes was also extremely difficult to achieve. Hence, it was clear that if they continued to research in this direction, they already wouldn't be far from a failure. When Feng Lin was looking at the information of the research topic, others were paying attention to him as well. Feng Lin radiated a sense of amicability, causing the goodwill others felt toward him to be multiplied. Finally, one of the researchers summoned his courage and walked over. Feng Lin, your modification of the adrenaline potion is extremely successful. I wonder if you can share with me your formula for me to gain experience? This question was very impudent. Where would there be people asking such direct questions about one's secrets? But Feng Lin was thinking like this. Isn't this a very good opportunity for me to form good relations with the people in the R&D department? It was just a modified formula for a high-grade adrenaline potion. Since Feng Lin already had the formula for the perfect grade adrenaline potion, he naturally didn't care too much about the formula for the high-grade one. He might as well take it out to use it to build up good relations here. A smile appeared on his face. His eyes had a look of complete trust and sincerity as he replied, "Of course. The adrenaline potion is a potion that stimulates the human body to secrete adrenaline. It can increase one's mental response speed. Hence, if you wish to modify the formula, you have to start first from the medical components effect." Feng Lin spoke, telling them the experience he gained from modifying the adrenaline potion's formula to a high-grade one. He naturally didn't mention a single word about the formula for the perfect grade adrenaline potion. But this was already enough. The researchers in the surroundings continued to move closer as they listened seriously to Feng Lin imparting his experience. A formless feeling of amiability and warmth radiated out from Feng Lin, akin to a plague. Everyone in the R&D department felt that Feng Lin was truly a good man, not hiding anything from them. He was willing to impart to them such valuable knowledge and experience. Two pair of eyes in the R&D department silently watched this scene. The eyes of Manager Frank were serene and boundlessly deep. No one could guess what he was thinking about. As for the other pair of eyes, from the research task force leader Yak, who was standing not far away, they were filled with a sinister look and trepidation. His expression turned ashen, and he didn't speak for a long time. All of a sudden, Feng Lin transformed from a newbie into the most popular person in the R&D department. Such formless influence was the most critical. Chapter 96, Successful Brainwashing. How does this high-grade potion formula improve the efficacy of the drug while increasing the duration? This is simple. The two main medical components of the adrenaline potion are the dragon bloodflower's nectar and spirit powder. For the two aspects of improvement, we just have to adjust the medicinal effect of the two components, and there would be results. Why must you use fluid ice? Because fluid ice is a natural spirit particle suppressor. It can effectively lower the activity of the spirit particles, and because it's purely made from water molecules, it wouldn't cause any adverse reactions when mixed with the other medical components. How can you tell precisely the actual amount needed for each of the medical components? This is also simple. The adrenaline potion is a gradeless potion. Its medicinal effect isn't strong, and even if there are side effects, the consumer would also be able to endure it. I personally tested it out myself and can clearly sense the change in the strength of the medicinal effect, thereby slowly improving it until the formula is optimal. This is much more accurate compared to human experimentations, allowing me to modify the formula to greater effect with quicker speed. The researchers of the R&D department gathered together with Feng Lin in the center. He patiently answered each question asked and drew a round of applause at the end of it. Well spoken. As expected of a genius genetic researcher personally recruited by Manager Frank. The speed of your thought process far exceeds ordinary humans. An impressed look could be seen on the faces of everyone. For a period of time, the large R&D department became a place solely for Feng Lin to give lectures. Almost all the researchers here were becoming his fans. His formless influence spread out silently. Feng Lin neutralized the hostility of everyone toward him, and through answering the questions of all the researchers with no reservations, the relationship between him and them started to warm up as he further deepened the impression that he was a good guy in the hearts of all these people. This impression was so deep that it would no longer be changed easily. He did so many things because he wanted to completely dissolve the hostility in the hearts of everyone toward him first, before he attempted his hypnotism technique. As things continued, Feng Lin gained more and more understanding with regards to hypnotism. He was no longer restricted to a single method, but was learning how to apply the techniques creatively and pragmatically. If earlier Feng Lin was considered everyone's enemy, the hostile attitude slowly changed to coldness, changed to the relationship of strangers, changed to being familiar with him, and changed to being passionate about him. In the end, their emotions were now of admiration and worship toward him. Feng Lin had completely become the center of attention in the R&D department and was extremely conspicuous. What are you all doing? Why are you guys not doing research? If you dare to slack, just forget about obtaining the month's end bonus. I will even dock all your salary. A dissonant voice rang out as a person with a sullen look on his face walked in. If it wasn't the task force team leader Yak, who else could it be? Everyone gave Feng Lin a good luck, you're on your own look as they scattered like birds and beasts, leaving the area here. Feng Lin, you came to the R&D department to work. If you wish to chat with someone, you can immediately leave the R&D department now and return home. There are more than enough slackers on the internet who are willing to waste time with you, reprimanded Yak rudely. Feng Lin had a calm expression on his face. He smiled. The task you gave me earlier was already completed. Am I not waiting for you, the leader, to give me another task to do? Yak felt fury in his heart. You mean that after half a day, it is my fault that you are slacking here idling your time away? He initially wanted to start mocking Fenglin. But all of a sudden, he only saw a pair of immeasurably deep eyes looking at him. The pair of eyes were like black holes devouring all light. Even his consciousness was devoured. A strange ripple gushed forth, formless and without substance. It was like a gentle breeze of wind blowing against the mountain walls. Like the light of the bright moon shining against the lake's water. The anger in Yak's heart suddenly seemed to be doused by a cold wave of spring water. His expression stiffened as his heart was filled with bewilderment. He wanted to be angry, but he didn't seem to be able to get angry. Hence, his expression looked somewhat comical. AI? What's going on with me? All of a sudden, his thinking changed. As the team leader of this research task force, why must he deliberately make things difficult for a member of his team? Although this newbie didn't have the foresight and made him extremely unhappy with his attitude toward human experimentations, Fenglin could still be considered an honest guy from the initial time they met. He himself was someone with a magnanimous heart that had a capacity that could contain the boundless seas. There was no need for him to set himself against a newbie. That would only serve to drag his status down. As Yak's thinking changed, his emotions changed as well. He was no longer angry, although his tone was still cold. Fenglin, your talent isn't bad. Your modifications to the adrenaline potion caused the progress speed of our research task force to greatly increase. However, you have to know your own limitations and don't waste time asking stupid questions and idling about. All right, here comes your next task. I want you to improve on the formula for the potions of life and lower the pain generated when one is consuming it. This scene caused everyone who was watching this to be greatly shocked. When did this strict and unkind leader become so friendly to people? Was there a ghost? Or could it be that this little fellow had used some sort of methods? Everyone started to speculate silently. A formless ripple then extended outward. The doubt in everyone's heart vanished and was replaced by the feelings of embarrassment and guilt. Earlier, Fenglin didn't hold anything back. He even imparted his experiences and formula of the improved adrenaline potion to us. Sigh, how can we start to doubt him without any evidence now? How mean of us. They suddenly linked it back to the fact that Fenglin's earlier performance had completely convinced Yak. This must be why his attitude toward Fenglin now was so mild. He even designated a much easier task compared to the one he had given earlier. Fenglin himself also didn't expect the effect of his hypnotism technique to be this good. Many thanks, leader. He agreed immediately and accepted the task Yak gave him, not letting Yak have any time for regret. Yak faintly felt that something was wrong, but since he had already spoken, he naturally couldn't go back on his words. Do it well then. Leaving a sentence, he hastily turned and departed. Fenglin silently wiped away his cold sweat as his vision started to dim. Hypnotism truly isn't something one can do often. Compared to earlier where he had been using formless ripples of hypnotism to influence others, Fenglin couldn't be bothered to waste time with Yak when he saw that Yak had clearly been here to make things difficult for him. Hence, he had forcibly used the hypnotism technique to brainwash Yak. By doing so, the consumption of mental energy was naturally much larger in comparison. His mental energy was soon exhausted, it was too tiring. In addition, although he forcibly brainwashed Yak today, he must not use it too often or there would be reverse effects and cause others to realize that something strange was going on. That would be self-defeating. Luckily, he had succeeded at the initial step. Next, Fenglin decided to stop. He completely retracted the mental energy back and no longer tried any tricks. Once an impression was formed, as long as there were no special changes, it would generally remain. Fenglin wasn't worried that these people would return to their original states. One couldn't help but say that his work environment that had been extremely harsh to him at the start was now a lot better. Feng Lin no longer felt the sensation of being targeted at every moment. Due to the fact that he had overused his mental energy, Feng Lin felt extremely tired and spiritless for the entire day. Luckily, there was no time limit for this task. After spending an unproductive day at work, he returned home and immediately fell asleep on his back. During the next day, after his mental energy had recovered, he started to attempt improving the formula for potions of life. Feng Lin knew that what he had to do next was to produce striking results, excelling at every task that was given to him. Only then could he become a core member of the R&D department and come into contact with the company's true secrets. The task this time around wasn't difficult. Although he had to improve on the formula for potions of life, it was fine as long as he could reduce the pain that would be inflicted to the body when one was consuming the potions of life. With regards to the medicinal effects caused by the potions of life, Feng Lin was extremely familiar with them. After all, he had drunk large amounts of potions of life before. Especially so for the first time, the powerful medicinal effects of the potions of life would rapidly modify the human body's structure. That kind of feeling that was akin to first destruction followed by creation would generate waves of pain and agony to the consumer. His experience was still fresh in his memory. This wasn't caused by the nature of the potions of life itself. By its nature, potions of life were merely gradeless low-tier potions. How stimulating could they be? The pain felt was generated by the human body when it started to undergo changes. The more outstanding the effect was, the larger the degree of the transformation and the more intense the pain there would be. Pain basically represented that the medicinal effect was good. Originally, there was no need to modify the formula for potions of life at all. If one couldn't even take this bit of pain, why were they still thinking about cultivation? Which interstellar cultivator didn't succeed in evolving after enduring much suffering and putting in hard work? But now, Yak actually requested him to modify the potion of life so the amount of pain would be greatly reduced when one consumed it. Feng Lin didn't feel that this was to reduce the efficacy of the potion of life. As he stared at the pain-filled, hideous expressions of the human test subjects, he was deep in contemplation. By lowering the severity of the pain, was it because Yak didn't want these test subjects to die from the torturous pain so ordinary humans could consume potions of life as well? Feng Lin's mind whirled and he thought of an idea. That was to increase the numbing medical components of the potion of life. If one fainted, the sense of pain would be dulled. It was like injecting them with anesthetic. Thinking of this was simple, but it was not so easy to succeed in doing it. Feng Lin made use of the AI here in the R&D department to accurately calculate what sort of ingredients could he add to potions of life to increase the anesthesia effect. Very swiftly, the AI listed 3 ingredients: 100 flowers snake grass, whale dragon oil, and intoxication fruit juice. The AI was ultimately still an AI. It could only begin its calculation from input data. But if one really wanted to find the answer, they still had to personally experiment with it. Feng Lin started his experiments. He used the skill he discovered earlier, the gene micromanipulation technique, to place the ingredients and allocate the appropriate amounts before he personally tested the effects. Ultimately, he managed to create a new and improved version for potions of life. 100 milliliters of whale dragon oil must be added to achieve the numbing effect. The consumer would then sink into a deep sleep, and the sensation of pain and agony would be greatly dulled. The effects of the original potions of life remained unchanged, just that the numbing aspect was increased. Since Feng Lin had already accomplished his mission, there was naturally no need for him to continue to waste time and effort to improve on the formula. Even for the perfect grade potions of life, they were already not very effective to the current Feng Lin. After Feng Lin handed up the improved formula, Yak was amazed. He then tested it out on a test subject and was extremely satisfied with the effects. The human test subject was now sleeping like a dead fish, completely not moving at all, yet his vitality stats was rapidly surging up. The result of the experiment was in perfect accordance with the task assigned to Feng Lin. Yak found Feng Lin more and more pleasing to the eye. Although there was some minor unhappiness at the start, it was true that his talent surpassed the others here. He had been of great help, allowing the progress speed of the research task force to advance greatly. Maybe it's time to let Feng Lin know about the core secrets of the research task force. Under Feng Lin's subtle influence from his hypnotism technique, Yak's malice toward Feng Lin had completely vanished. In his heart, he began treating Feng Lin like a capable subordinate and would often smile and laugh with Feng Lin. If earlier their relationship could be said to be one of complete enmity and loathing, they were now completely friendly with each other. The people of the R&D department had an expression on their faces like they had just seen a ghost. When did the relationship between Yak and Feng Lin become this good? Yet, they didn't notice the gleam in Feng Lin's immeasurably deep eyes. His eyes were like black holes, capable of devouring the souls of others. The brainwashing attempt was a success. Chapter 97, Research Recording. This is the research recording of the subject. Take it back with you and have a good look. Feng Lin, your talents are beyond that of an ordinary person. You are not required to do ordinary tasks anymore. You will become the core staff of our research task force. Under Feng Lin's mental brainwashing, team leader Yak's attitude toward Feng Lin was favorable now. Yak was gradually regarding Feng Lin as his right hand. Once the day's work was completed, on their way back, he did not hold anything back. He specially took the confidential research recording and handed it over to Feng Lin so he could watch it. As the others within the R&D department saw this, they couldn't help but become envious. The classified research recording was already shown to Feng Lin. What this represented was something that people within the R&D department couldn't be more clear of. This Feng Lin had only been at the R&D department for a few days, and he had already become a core staff member. What kind of tempo was this? It was the tempo of steadily rising. Everyone was admiring him. None of them were jealous. That was because this was something that could not be gained from jealousy. As a core department within the giant pharmaceutical company, the R&D department was one of the most important ones. Although the competitive pressure was great, it needed to be backed up with strength and ability. They could all clearly see that Feng Lin's assignment into the core members was not because he was relying on relationships or going through another back door, but he had earned it with his extraordinary skill and strength. Even though everyone within the R&D department was quite fond of Feng Lin, being surpassed by a newbie still left a sour taste in their mouth. However, even the mixed feelings they had were not jealousy. What they were unaware of was that Feng Lin could improve so quickly because he had developed the gene micromanipulation technique with genetic equation as the basis. The other reason was that Feng Lin was using hypnotism technique to brainwash Yak to reduce the prejudice he had against him. Therefore, Yak would use him instead. Right now, Feng Lin felt better than ever. He was glad that he had chosen the right path and mastered the hypnotism technique. He manipulated his own biomagnetic field to create a sense of closeness and unconsciously caused others around him to dispel their hostility. Now the environment that was full of hostility had been resolved. With enough freedom and space, he could freely display his means with ease. Since the solar system was a chaotic star region, the social order was in an incomparable chaotic state. The feeling of the people was extremely cold and detached toward each other. Mastering the hypnotism technique would allow him to invade other people's heart quietly, thus creating an advantageous situation for himself. This was exactly what Feng Lin needed. At the end of the day's work, Feng Lin smiled and greeted the other colleagues as he walked toward his own room. Once he was separated from the crowd where nobody else would notice his expression anymore, Feng Lin's smile quickly vanished, his expression chilling. Back in his own room, Feng Lin immediately began his cultivation. He drank 10 bottles of potion of life consecutively, as well as 10 bottles of nutrient fluids. Even though his body was slender, his stomach was like that of a cow's. His appetite was beyond imagination. Feng Lin felt that what he was drinking was not potions but money. He rapidly consumed a large amount of money into his stomach. A huge sense of urgency appeared within his heart. He needed to make money as soon as possible. Since it was making money, was there any job that would generate wealth better than a genetic pharmacist? Therefore, becoming a genetic pharmacist was Feng Lin's imperative. He did not think too deeply into it. He calmed his breathing and began to immerse himself within his cultivation. Utilizing the technique to transform energy into qi, the rate in which the nutrients were converted into genetic potential doubled. Genetic potential plus 20%, plus 20%, plus 20%. Soon, it had reached 668%. His vitality soared to 18.9. Once his cultivation was complete, Feng Lin opened his eyes and sighed in regret. Although his genetic potential increased dramatically, he still felt dissatisfied. Now, his demand for genetic potential grew bigger and bigger. At the rate he was cultivating, it would require at least 3 more sessions before he could reach over 1000% genetic potential. Also, he could collect enough for a free primeval genetic point. He was also uncertain about the changes that would come from a small enhancement to the stone monkey gene. However, just thinking about it was useless. He had fully converted the nutrients. Continuous cultivation was very taxing on his mental consumption. Feng Lin fell asleep on his bed. Once he woke up, he felt refreshed. He quickly washed up and began watching the research recording. Taking advantage of the fact that people's minds were most agile during the morning, he felt it was a good opportunity to familiarize himself with the research recording. The recording also had very detailed data of the human experiments during different intervals. He endured the discomfort within his heart and continued to watch the recording. He was slowly gaining an understanding of what the R&D department was doing. Gene potion had stimulating effects on genes. After repeated consumption and stimulating a certain gene, it could allow a person to passively awaken a gene. But the most important premise was that the human body must be able to withstand the side effects of the drug. In the initial experiment, the experiment subjects could not bear the potency of the drug after drinking the potion and their body exploded, causing death. But later, as the R&D department continued to dilute, suppress, and adjust the medicinal potency, some of the experiment subjects were about to withstand lighter medicinal effects. Their vitality was also strengthened. The corresponding mythological genes appeared to show signs of gene awakening. The situation seemed like it would turn out well, but in the end, it was met with silence. That was because a human body's tolerance was limited. Though one could continuously try to approach this limit, once they exceeded the limit of the human body, they would collapse. While the experiment subjects were under continuous experiments that increased their tolerance, but without exception, their body would explode. That was the limits of the ordinary person's body. This was innate and difficult to change. After repeated trials, the R&D department had no solution. At this point, Feng Lin was keenly aware that their goal was no longer limited to challenging the limits of the human body. They had begun on the path of improving the potion itself. They were trying to improve the medicinal effectiveness and lower the side effects. This point was especially stirring for Feng Lin. The first time he arrived at the R&D department, he was assigned the task to improve the adrenaline potion. Wasn't this the purpose? However, Feng Lin was not optimistic about this approach. The giant pharmaceutical company was an organization with lots of concealed talent. There were several genetic pharmacists within the R&D department, and improving a potion formula was nothing difficult for them. Seeing as there had been no progress for so long, he could see their way of thinking wasn't very effective. So, what was the issue? Feng Lin had a premonition in his heart that this was a crucial point in assisting himself in solving this task. Moreover, it would assist him greatly to steadily step into the field of genetic pharmacists. His future would be boundless. Feng Lin studied the footage intensively while constantly controlling the picture in front of him. Suddenly, a scene before him caught his attention. This section of the recording was from 3 years ago according to the information on the video. Moreover, it was especially strange that the experiment scene displayed was not within the R&D department. This seemed like it was a secluded environment. Quickly, dig the ruins. It may contain the secret from ancient myths and legends. What is this fragrance? It seems to be a type of potion. Perhaps this was some type of ancient divine medicine. Why is this potion an ointment? Static noises came from the video without a person in sight. Suddenly, the picture abruptly changed to the research department. A purple, ointment-like substance was forcibly inserted into the mouth of an experimental subject by a researcher in a white lab coat. The next instance, the experimental subject's expression was filled with pain. His veins became vascular as though they were spider webs covering his body. He was like an evil spirit that came from hell. His sinister face glared at the surrounding people as he gnashed his teeth toward them. He wished he could drink their blood and eat their flesh. A group of researchers stood near the glass container and observed the reaction of the experimental subject closely. The one leading them was the R&D department's head, Manager Frank. Suddenly, the experiment subject clenched his own throat with his hands and gave off a heart-wrenching cry. 2 bulging growths suddenly grew from his back, and they were rapidly getting bigger. The R&D department became rowdy. That is truly an ancient divine medicine. It can actually affect mortals. What would the effects be? Would it allow them to become gene cultivators? Unbelievable. Boom boom. The sound of something breaking through the body rang out. The growths ruptured and blood splashed toward the surroundings. A pair of wings burst through the back of the research subject. One was golden while the other was silver. Blood dripped 1 drop at a time from the soft silky feathers. Suddenly, the wings flapped fiercely. Swish, wind and thunder simultaneously congregated as it echoed with a loud noise. This was Wings of Wind and Thunder. Chapter 98, Ancient Divine Medicine. Hua, hua, hua. Wings of wind and thunder flapped non-stop. Meanwhile, the wind and thunder tore through the surrounding in an imposing manner. Within the narrow glass container, all they could see was rolling thunder and raging winds. The tornado and thunder shrouded the experiment subject from observation. The person is awake. It is surely worthy of the name ancient divine medicine. What miraculous effects it has. If we could research the technique to develop it, we could subvert the entire gene potion market. Flourish and wealth, our giant pharmaceutical company will become rich. Quick, what are you waiting for? Study the new data from this lab rat. The R&D department within the video was in chaos. Feng Lin was also struck dumb when he saw this scene. An ordinary person could grow the wings of wind and thunder after consuming the ancient divine medicine. This scene was beyond imagination. It was in a complete contradiction with the theory of mythological genes. It was no wonder that Luke from Mars' Revolutionary Army was full of hostility and jealousy. It turned out that giant pharmaceutical company had discovered a possibility that gene potion could be consumed by ordinary people. However, it was a technology that could not be resurrected at this time. Boom. Suddenly, he heard the sound of glass bursting. Feng Lin watched in surprise. The highly tempered glass container was completely shattered and had fallen to the ground. A fierce wind swept through for a second, and a slender man could be seen standing in place, carrying indomitable spirit inside his streamlined muscular body. The man closed his wings together to cover himself. The researchers couldn't get a clear look at his face. This is bad. The lab rat has escaped from the glass container. Based on the intensity of his energy fluctuation, he may have already become a genetic cultivator. Capture him, don't let him get away. This is our best lab rat. Due to the sudden change in events, their surprise immediately turned to panic. Moreover, the words they had spoken angered the experiment subject even further. Spreading his wings and revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes, the sounds he released from his throat were hoarse and low. It would seem that the experiment subject had not spoken in a long time. He gnawed his teeth as he spoke one word at a time. I want you all dead. Once the word dead was spoken, the next instance, the experiment subject accelerated from stillness to his peak speed, turning into a shadow and throwing himself at the crowd as if he was a ruthless predator. The feathers of his wings were sturdy and sharp. His wings swept across, releasing a light that radiated the surroundings, blowing the dense red fog away. In an instant, those feeble researchers couldn't fight back, and it resulted in heavy casualties. Powerful wind and thunder were released every time the mutated man flapped his wings. He intently vented while flaunting his power, turning the R&D department into a mess. Screams could be heard and fleeing bodies could be seen. Just when Feng Lin thought that the mutated man would continue on his rampage, he noticed that manager Frank shouted something in the video, but he could not hear what Frank was saying there. The recording had been specially edited to remove the voice recorded in this section. Boom! A loud bursting noise could be heard, and a black shadow appeared from thin air. The speed was so fast that even the video could not capture its exact appearance. The black shadow was like a ghost as it appeared behind the mutated subject. Its hands caught the rapidly flapping wings and fiercely tore them. The mutant screamed in pain as he looked behind him, showing a face that was filled with horror as the wings of wind and thunder were ripped from his back and blood spilled unceasingly from his wounds. However, the black shadow had disappeared without a trace. It had only been an instant from the moment the shadow appeared until it finished dealing with the mutant. The speed at which it was completed made it feel almost like an illusion. The only proof that the shadow had appeared was the mutant twitching and laying on the ground. Feng Lin's expression suddenly became serious. The giant pharmaceutical company had many secrets, and now there was also a hidden formidable existence. Although he could not clearly see the appearance of the shadow, he could approximate the height of the shadow, which was about 5 meters tall. It was definitely not human. The members of the R&D department were like 3-year-old kids in front of the shadow. In the end, the mutant that had gone berserk was now completely defenseless. The mutant, who had his wings ripped out by the shadow, was violently twitching on the ground. He was completely in pain as blood gushed out of the wounds on his back. He no longer had the slightest power to resist. It was as if all his power had left when the wings were ripped out. Everyone swarmed toward the mutant and tied him up. They then continued the experiment. The data displayed also proved this point. The mutant's data had fallen across the board and returned to that of an ordinary person. There was nothing special about the data. Feng Lin was getting ready to continue watching, but the recording finished all of a sudden. At this step, it had abruptly stopped. He realized that he had just watched the footage depicting the beginning of the giant pharmaceutical company's discovery. They had fed an ordinary person the ancient divine medicine which had been retrieved from a mythological ruin. Surprisingly, it could cause an ordinary person to become a gene cultivator. Perhaps giant pharmaceutical company had started researching on this topic because they realized there was potential for ordinary people to gain extraordinary abilities by consuming gene potions. Feng Lin repeatedly watched the recording 3 times. He memorized the progress of the R&D department from top to bottom. After discovering that ancient divine medicine had such miraculous effects, the giant pharmaceutical company's R&D department immediately began their research. They wanted to replicate the process using gene potions. However, none of them had succeeded. They had an abundance of talent who put forward a variety of ideas, but none of them was successful. After all, this was an ancient divine medicine from the time of myths and legends, which was a long-lost technology. It contained the secrets of ancient divine cultivation, which was not easy for people to crack. However, Feng Lin now understood the fear of Luke from the Mars Revolutionary Army. Technology was feasible and the giant pharmaceutical company had the original medicine as an example. If they were about to replicate it, then they would naturally be able to develop this ancient divine medicine. Although it was difficult to realize now, it would be successful sooner or later. If giant pharmaceutical company had an ulterior motive, with their huge impact and profound mastery in gene potions creation technology, they could cause complete chaos within the entire solar system if they made an arbitrary move. This was not something that Feng Lin was willing to see. He was only here to become a genetic pharmacist. He did not want to be dragged into a vortex of conflict. If he was not careful for an instant, he could be swallowed up without recourse. What should he do about this now? Feng Lin pondered and suddenly a thought flickered in his mind. If he took the lead in discovering this ancient medicine's formula, would it mean that he could interfere with the research direction of the R&D department, allowing the situation to fall under his control? He was completely stirred by this thought. However, for him to succeed in researching the technique, it would require him to study the ancient divine medicine. Only watching the research recording did not help his situation. These research recordings were the experience of those who failed. Even watching more of them would not help him find the possibility for success. What was there for him to pay attention to? The next day, when he arrived at the R&D department, Feng Lin told team leader Yak about his intention. Once Yak heard it, he was shocked. What? You want to study the ancient divine medicine yourself? Due to the effects of Feng Lin's brainwashing, Yak's impression of Feng Lin was superb. However, when Feng Lin said that he had spent only one day to watch all the research recordings and wanted to study the ancient divine medicine himself, Yak was at disbelief. No matter how talented he was, a newbie was still a newbie. This ancient divine medicine was R&D department's greatest secret. It wasn't something that could be seen just because he wanted to see it. Feng Lin, don't bite off more than you can chew. You should take it one step at a time. Even though Yak was upset, he still persuaded Feng Lin patiently. Seeing this harsh and sulky person have such a good attitude toward himself, Feng Lin laughed within his heart. This was the marvelous power of brainwashing. Through the hypnotism technique, he was able to change people's views one step at a time. The effect of his technique was obvious. Toward Yak's implied rejection, Feng Lin stubbornly continued without backing down. Yes, team leader. I have already finished watching all the research recordings. However, I realize that there have been no breakthroughs with the research topic. Although the R&D department is filled with talent, many of them are already professional genetic pharmacists, they still had not been successful in cracking the research topic. If I followed in their way of thinking, I would not be able to do any better with the research topic. That's why I want to approach the topic from the ancient divine medicine. I may be able to discover some new ideas. He is still a genetic researcher but already wants to develop his own method and ideas? What kind of joke is this? Yak's instinct was ready to reject Feng Lin. Agree to it. At this moment, a voice rang and interrupted Yak. Yak turned his head around and noticed that Manager Frank was coming over. Manager, you mean? He could not believe it. I think what Feng Lin was saying makes a lot of sense. Manager Frank laughed as he implored, you, bring him to the secluded lab. Yak was stunned. He did not expect Manager Frank to regard Feng Lin with such importance. No matter how good his impression of Feng Lin was, at this time, he would develop a sense of jealousy. If a newbie were to make any contribution, wouldn't he or she become an equal of Yak, or even surpass him? No matter how good his impression of Feng Lin was, facing people that threatened their status, he would still take extra precautions. However, he did not show his discontent in front of the boss. Instead, he nodded and said, okay. Follow me. Yak said these words stiffly as he turned around and walked forward. Toward Yak's sudden cold attitude, Feng Lin felt strange. Was his brainwashing ineffective now? After thinking for a bit, he understood the reason. This was the fault of competitive gains. This was an essential desire of men. Even brainwashing could not change that. He stopped worrying and followed along. As he walked by, Manager Frank specifically patted his shoulder. Feng Lin, do your best. I am very optimistic about your work. If you were able to crack the code to the secret of the ancient divine medicine, giant pharmaceutical companies' reward will be beyond your imagination. Feng Lin nodded. At this point, Yak had already reached the deepest corner of the R&D department and spoke in a deep tone, AI, open the secluded lab. A red light shone on his body as mechanical noises could be heard in the air. Identity verified. Secluded lab is about to open. Feng Lin watched the metal wall in front of him move to the two sides, revealing a giant space. This was a large laboratory built entirely of metal. The four walls had no gaps in it, and it was completely enclosed where even flies could not enter. Feng Lin felt like his horizons had broadened. The giant pharmaceutical company had too many secrets. Without becoming a core staff, he would never be able to know how many trump cards the company had. Feng Lin entered the lab and immediately saw the crystal ball in the center. The interior of the ball was a complete vacuum environment. In the middle of the vacuum, an ointment-like medicine could be seen floating about freely. Chapter 99, Mental Detection. Unexpectedly. The interior of the enclosed laboratory was very empty, a stark contrast to the overcrowded area outside. The crystal ball in the middle caught Feng Lin's attention. The environment within the sphere was a completely sterile vacuum. Floating within, a paste-like substance could be seen. However, the paste did not have an aesthetic appearance. It was soft and dry like that of mud. But Feng Lin could tell from one glance that it was the ancient divine medicine he had previously seen in the research recording. That is the ancient divine medicine. There is a scanning machine here that can scan drugs and display what the drug's composition and structure are. You should handle it with care. Don't touch things unnecessarily. If you damage the ancient divine medicine, you won't be able to afford it even if you sell your soul. Though Yak did not enter the laboratory, he warned Feng Lin seriously. As the research task force's leader, Yak was no stranger to the ancient divine medicine. He had seen it quite a bit, but had not garnered any results in his research. Seeing it anymore would not result in anything. What would this brat achieve from here on? Watching Feng Lin's figure walking in, his expression was gloomy. The metal wall closed naturally. In an instant, Feng Lin was the only person left inside the enclosed laboratory. It was extremely quiet, an environment that was suitable for experimentation. Feng Lin acted accordingly, as such an important laboratory would have surveillance set within. Maybe Manager Frank and team leader Yak were observing him from behind the scenes. He observed diligently and began his research toward the ancient divine medicine. it was just as he expected. Inside the office, a holographic projection was monitoring his every move. Frank and Yak were watching as they started to discuss. "Yak, do you think he can have some results?" Manager Frank said with a smile on his face. "Impossible." Yak shook his head as he spoke. "Though this kid has talent, the ancient divine medicine is the result of mythological techniques. Thus, it is not easy to break through and comprehend. There are so many official geneticists here, and yet none of us have done it. The main reason is that there was a huge technical barrier. The ancient divine medicine is in a solid state, while potions are in liquid form. It may seem like only its state that has changed, but its innate essence is completely different." Though he had a good relationship with Feng Lin right now, he was less than optimistic about Feng Lin's results. The reasons he provided were also very logical. Manager Frank was not surprised either. "Although it is very unlikely that he would succeed, I still hope this kid can make a breakthrough. Since this ancient divine medicine was discovered from the mythological ruin, I specifically hired Feng Lin because of his knowledge with myths and legends. I wanted to utilize his knowledge to see if he could uncover the truth behind the ancient divine medicine. You should know that headquarters have been rushing us for an answer. They want to carry out the plan as soon as possible. Moreover, the rebel army of Mars has been more active lately. It seems they are up to something. The current situation is becoming more unstable." "I hope so." The voices of the two gradually calmed down. Of course, Feng Lin naturally had no clue what was happening in the office. He was studying the ancient divine medicine carefully. Only by seeing it himself could he realize how mysterious the ancient divine medicine was. This ancient divine medicine was in a solid state. It was completely different from the normal gene potions. Gene potion was in a liquid state because it allowed the medicinal effect to be absorbed quickly. How does this solid drug work? How could it allow ordinary people to awaken mythological genes without their body exploding? These were all questions that Feng Lin pondered within his heart. He began to scan the ancient divine medicine with the instrument. A projected light was illuminated on the medicine, displaying the data. Carbon, 27.23%, oxygen, 21.54%, mercury, 18.25%, copper, 10.2%. Feng Lin observed the results of the scan. He realized that there were various elements shown on the display. He was not satisfied with the scan results. The galaxy was full of elements. What good would it be to know these? The key was to know its synthetic form. But something strange occurred. There were many strange shadows on the scanned image. Feng Lin could tell there were countless circular structures connected, but he could not see them clearly. Feng Lin continued to use various instruments within the laboratory. The results turned out to be fruitless. He's scanning the drug's composition. No much use. The ancient divine medicine has extraordinary characteristics. It contains too many spirit particles which could interfere with the scanning equipment. Frank and Yak observed Feng Lin's movements closely as they commented. At this time, Feng Lin had discovered one thing. A clump of garbled characters appeared on the image of the instrument. It was the result of spirit particles' irregular motion. The spirit particles within the ancient divine medicine were off the charts, interfering with the rays used for scanning. The interference left a mess as dense static covered the entire image. It was difficult for people to see the truth clearly. This did not just occur to him. Feng Lin discovered within the research recording that others before him had the same issue. They could only use primitive means to explore the effects of the drugs. They had taken small samples of the ancient divine medicine and force-fed it on the experiment subjects. Through observations of their reactions, the researchers then hypothesized the effects of the ancient divine medicine. The efficiency of this method was too low. Feng Lin knew that he needed to be the first one to arrive at the right answer, thus, he could not use this method. To explore one step at a time was too slow. To see through the essence of the ancient divine medicine was the only route. The premise was that he had to thoroughly study the ancient divine medicine. Unfortunately, these scientific instruments would not work. Feng Lin did not come up with any good solution at this time. He was deep in thought as his mental energy unconsciously leaked from between his brows. Suddenly, he came to a thought. Mental energy can detect everything. Why could it not be used to detect the components of the ancient divine medicine? Once he came up with the idea, he acted upon it. However, to prevent his secret of awakening the mental gene from being discovered, Feng Lin acted as if he was observing the data on the instrument as he discreetly released his mental energy to penetrate the ancient divine medicine. Immediately, he felt the difference. Spirit particles and mental energy seemed to have a wonderful coordination that resulted in no interferences during the mental scan. The components of the ancient divine medicine were presented clearly. Feng Lin was surprised to see that the interior of the divine medicine was not a macromolecular structure. Instead, it was composed of numerous crystal-like substances that formed a paste. Each crystal was independent of each other, but closely bundled together as if it was one whole. Feng Lin was secretly surprised. How was such a logical and scientific structure formed? It was simply a work of art. This was impossible to achieve with the current gene potion technology. A completely new discovery. Feng Lin couldn't help but imagine what technology would have been able to refine such a wonderful, to its microscopic level, drug. What godly technique? This was completely incomprehensible with his current abilities. For this exact reason, Feng Lin felt that the previous R&D department was on the wrong track. If they did not understand this strange technology, it would be impossible to recreate the effect of the divine medicine. Blindly exploring was of no use. Just like a frog at the bottom of a well, no matter how intelligent and creative it was, it would not be able to know the real sky. Feng Lin began to concentrate on his observations by utilizing his mental energy. The more focused he was, the more detailed his perceptions became. The crystals appeared to be perfect polygons. There were not too many or too little edges. They were filled with the beauty of arithmetic. Thump thump thump. Suddenly, he felt a slight vibration. It was very light but clear. Feng Lin could no longer control the expression on his face. He widened his eyes. He could feel that the crystals were shaking slightly, as if they had life. Moreover, they were moving slowly as if they were tiny microbes. This is not an illusion. The crystal materials have biomagnetic field? What is this? Feng Lin was completely shocked. Is this a life-refined medicine? Chapter 100, Life-Refined Medicine. As long as something was alive, it would have a biomagnetic field. Biomagnetic fields were the external manifestation of life. The stronger the life, the greater the fluctuations produced by the biomagnetic field would be, and vice versa. These crystals had very weak life forces, resulting in their biomagnetic fields also being extremely weak. Feng Lin had only discovered this after he concentrated his mental energy and scanned the paste meticulously. Each crystal is alive. Could it be that this ancient divine medicine is some strange life form or some alien race? Incredible. Feng Lin had always been calm, but now, he was so shocked that he couldn't say a single thing. Life-refined medicine? Amazing. Although these crystals were extremely minuscule and couldn't be seen by the human eye, they were clearly alive. Also, life creation was undoubtedly the power of the creator in the legends. Feng Lin's astonishment was plain on his face, and he wasn't able to mask it no matter how he tried to. Behind the monitoring projection, Frank had a look of surprise when he noticed the strange look on Feng Lin's face. He spoke in a low voice. Did he discover something? I don't know. Maybe he discovered some aspect of the ancient divine medicine that he couldn't understand? After all, this is a medicinal substance that is in a solid state. No matter who it is, they would definitely be surprised by this. Yak replied. Yet, Frank shook his head. Things shouldn't be so simple. Although this Feng Lin is young, his temperament is extremely seasoned. If he was just startled slightly, how would he lose his self-control? He must have definitely discovered something. Oh. Yak was startled. He was very clear that Frank, as the manager of the entire R&D department, had exceptional judgment. He wouldn't be mistaken easily. Could it be that this little fellow actually discovered something? Yak stared at the figure of Feng Lin, and the look in his eyes changed from the earlier warmth back to a gloomy coldness. As for Feng Lin now, he was very unsatisfied with his discovery. He realized that it was because his mental energy was insufficient, and the amount of precision wasn't high enough. This was why he had no way to see more of the hidden truths. The giant pharmaceutical company couldn't be blamed for not realizing that mental energy had the effect of being able to probe this ancient divine medicine. The compositions of those crystals were truly too minuscule. If one's mental energy wasn't strong enough to a certain level, even the scans conducted by machinery would be clearer. Also, mental gene was an extremely rare seen gene. Only a few people had awakened it, and even for those who had awakened it, it wouldn't be easy for them to strengthen the gene. Despite the size of the giant pharmaceutical company, it was also very difficult for them to find a genius in genetic studies that had also awakened the mental gene. Hence, no one had discovered this until Feng Lin did. But despite the strengthening tally of his mental gene being at 4 points, it was clearly still insufficient. He stared at his genetic potential of 618% and made a decision. Initially, he wanted to store up enough genetic potential to exchange it for a free primeval genetic point to strengthen his stone monkey gene. But now, there was a change in that plan. If he wanted to pry the secrets of this ancient divine medicine, his mental energy had to be stronger and his perception also had to be more precise. In that case, strengthening his mental gene was the only option left. Feng Lin no longer hesitated and decisively used 100% of his genetic potential to change for a free basic genetic point. The strengthening tally of his mental gene silently jumped from 4 to 5, and his genetic potential decreased to 518%. By strengthening this basic mental gene one time, his vitality increased by 0.8 and reached 19.7. But this wasn't the main point. Feng Lin didn't have time to pay attention to this. As his mental gene was strengthened, his mental energy grew in capacity once more. The world before his vision changed again. His mental perception seemed to have become a microscope multiple times stronger than the past. He was able to zoom in more, causing the crystals to enlarge in his vision and becoming the size of a fist. Upon a closer look, Feng Lin discovered that each crystal was actually divided into 2 layers. Its interior was a circular structure, while its exterior was covered by a crystalline shell acting as a layer of skin or armor that protected the interior. The crystals were squirming about unceasingly, resembling microorganisms. They are truly alive. His earlier conjecture was right. There was no doubt that these crystals were a type of life forms. Why did he say so? Because, after careful observation, he discovered that the movements of the crystal life forms weren't by random, there was responsiveness to them. The crystals of this ancient divine medicine were moving unceasingly, but they would never come in contact with each other and would intentionally evade the others. This type of weak yet extremely clear fluctuations from their biomagnetic fields couldn't be faked. A strange thought suddenly arose in Feng Lin's heart. The formless mental energy that he was radiating formed into the shape of a thorn as he gently pricked the crystalline outer layer of one of the crystals. Li. However, the crystal life form suddenly moved, expanding in size. The corners of the crystal elongated upward, like a hedgehog bristling its quills. The biomagnetic field of the crystal life form suddenly changed, radiating a sense of rage. The fluctuations grew more and more violent, like the churning waves of an ocean. Fenglin was like someone who kicked a hornet's nest. Upon sensing the anger of their brethren, the other crystals also started to move in tandem. A moment later, a chaotic surge of intense shot over. At the start, Fenglin didn't mind it. However, the life of these crystals was from the same source, and their intents could actually fuse together to attack. Instantly, Fenglin felt as though a sharp sword had ruthlessly stabbed into his soul. It was incredibly painful. Fenglin accidentally let out a scream, forgetting to control himself. What happened? This strange scene shocked Frank and Yak. Their eyes stared unblinkingly at the situation inside the lab. The moment he screamed, Fenglin silently cursed at himself. Although he reacted quickly, everything was too late. His earlier scream might have already been discovered by Frank and Yak. Most probably, he had to think of a good explanation to give them. In any case, that wasn't urgent yet. The more important thing now was to find out more clearly about the situation of the ancient divine medicine. Since he had already exposed himself, Fenglin actually decided not to hide his actions anymore. He directly closed his eyes. What is he doing? Frank and Yak had a bewildered look on their faces. When he thought of what had happened earlier, Fenglin grew more and more excited. These crystals actually know how to counterattack? How interesting. Since they have consciousnesses, would they have memories too? Maybe I can try to hypnotize them and glean some information with regards to the ancient divine medicine from them. Fenglin suddenly had this idea. Although it sounded incredulous, it was not impossible. After all, given how wondrous this ancient divine medicine was, ordinary methods would surely be useless. If he wanted to understand its characteristics, he had to think outside the box. Fenglin immediately acted the moment he decided to do so. He started by sensing the biomagnetic fields of these crystals. However, contrary to his expectations, it was exceedingly difficult. Because these life forms were too minuscule and the fluctuations of their biomagnetic field were simply too weak, Fenglin found it hard to even perceive them accurately. In order to heighten his perception, his mental energy must naturally be stronger. He needed to continue strengthening his mental gene before it would be possible for him to do so. Fenglin no longer hesitated. His genetic potential dropped by another 100%, and the strengthening tally of the mental gene rose to 6. His vitality also reached 20.5, officially breaking past the 20.0 mark. His already sharp perception grew even sharper. The shape of these crystals once again enlarged in his vision. They were originally the size of a fist before, but now they became the size of soccer balls. Their biomagnetic fields also grew clearer to him. But this was still not enough. He had to continue adding points. Fenglin didn't stop and continued what he was doing. The strengthening tally of his mental gene went from 6 to 7, and his vitality stats climbed to 21.3. The biomagnetic fields of these crystals grew clearer and clearer. He even sensed emotions from them, but they were very pure. There weren't any complex emotions. Fenglin rejoiced as he could put his plan in motion. In truth, these crystal life forms were as weak as worms. Now that he knew their intents were not complex at all, maybe he would be able to easily hypnotize them. But when he attempted it, he discovered that things weren't as simple as he had imagined. Although the emotions of these crystals were more simple and unsophisticated, Their wills had been tempered by the passage of countless years and were incomparably resolute. If he wanted to hypnotize them, the consumption to his mental energy would far exceed his initial expectations. After he had managed to hypnotize one of the tiny crystals, he found it difficult to continue. His mental energy entered into the depths of the crystal he had hypnotized, forming a connection with the will produced by its life. After that, there actually was a faint flow of information into his mind, showing him some incomplete images and sounds. However, these memories were not whole, they seemed to be shrouded in fog, and Feng couldn't see them clearly. This was clearly far from enough. Since he had already added points to the mental gene, Feng decided that he might as well go all out. The strengthening tally of the mental gene reached 9, and his vitality climbed to 22.9. After becoming an interstellar cultivator, his vitality would always surge explosively after he had strengthened a gene. Feng was gradually growing numb to the fact. Right now, Feng only had 118% of genetic potential left, but he didn't mind this. His mental gene's strengthening tally shot up, and it caused his mental energy capacity to increase greatly. At last, he finally managed to hypnotize all the crystal life forms. At the next instant, countless memories from these crystals began to stream into his mind, bringing him into an illusionscape. Right now, an ancient, mysterious scroll image appeared before Feng. A voice akin to the tolling of a giant golden bell that spanned across the river of time reverberated in his ears. Heaven and earth as the furnace, fate as the worker. Yin and yang as the charcoal fire, the multitude of things in the world as ingredients.